are with the Commonwealth area, and we got a medic with us, and I'm really excited because I don't really know anything from your guys' side, so I am here and I just want to learn from you. Tell me about what you guys do.
Absolutely. So we see variances in medicine across all of the different powers that were involved.
Right.
America and Germany kind of being the most advanced because they had the most access to pharmaceutical, surgical equipment, sterilization. They were extremely modern. And then on the scarce end, you have like the Soviets, which really were extremely rudimentary in what they did. There's a lot of archaic World War I and even pre-World War I medicine. Britain's like a sweet spot. Not as great as the Americans, not as bad as the Soviets and the Japanese. Britain was very resource limited because it's an island nation. And they weren't exactly as progressed as America because they didn't have enough time for the R&D and the medicine development, and they didn't have the money. They were still recovering from World War I. So a lot of what you see here, and this is just a basic, what they would give a field medic, minus a couple things.
Okay.
And specifically, this is for a medic that would have been in the 1st Airborne, jumping into Arnhem. I know we're at a D-Day event, but there are variances in the medics from airborne to airborne. The biggest one, 1st Airborne that jumped into Arnhem, they only had 5 medics with them from our unit, which is the 21st IPC Independent Parachute Company, and they were the Pathfinder unit for the jump into Arnhem. They had all of their medics armed either with a Webley revolver, a Browning high power, a 1911, and in some cases they even carried a Lee Enfield, because they fell into the same like Geneva Convention rules that the Germans agreed to, where the Germans actually armed their medics, so did some of the British as a defensive measure.
Yeah.
So that's like the main rudimentary piece of equipment, because the first thing that they would get trained on is how to shoot.
Okay.
And then really from that, as far as a field medic's perspective, Britain didn't have the same access to morphine. They had some. They had very little to no access to any type of formal like penicillin and an antibiotic like that. A lot of these shell dressings are impregnated with sulfa, just like the American bandages are. And typically, the standard British soldier would get issued one, just like the Americans would have their first aid kit, Germans would have theirs. And this would go into the pocket right here, and it's essentially the World War II equivalent of a modern IFAK, so you would have this for yourself.
Okay.
Again, British Airborne being very resource limited because they're jumping into a combat zone and they have to rely on any supplies dropped to them or brought in by ground, would also be given shell dressings, which are these bigger ones. And this is a shell dressing that's kind of filleted out for you with the sulfa on it. And a lot of them would just attach it to their shoulder, and this was kind of seen throughout all of their airborne campaigns. Not necessarily earlier on in North Africa, but as they progressed through Italy and then throughout France and Holland, you would see a lot of the paras either attach it here, a little bit different than the Americans, because the Americans would pop it right on their helmet or put it on their leg or put it somewhere on them. The Canadian Airborne actually did, during the Normandy invasion, shove bandages up into their helmets, so it was kind of similar to the US, but a lot of them just attached it to the epaulets because the British really love their epaulets. Essentially, a airborne medic would jump in with this equipment, 2 bags of shell dressings, maybe some ampules of morphine, a lot of like prophylactic kits, water purification tablets. Soap was a big thing, trying to stay clean in the battlefield, because the best medicine is preventative medicine.
Right.
That's really about it. They would have supplemental equipment dropped into them. So you had combat medics that were assigned to the airborne, and then you had the Royal Army Medical Corps, and they would basically come in as like a secondary asset that wasn't necessarily a combat unit, but they jumped pretty closely. So like a lot of the time, there's 5 guys that jumped into Arnhem with our unit specifically. That was it. You know, it was a lot of rudimentary trying to control bleeding, and believe it or not, more so with the Brits, it was about comfort care, because they were kind of they had some self-actualization that the care that they were providing wasn't the best. So like a tin of cigarettes would come with this, 100 cigarettes, but you'd only get a book of like 20 matches, so 20 matches for 100 cigarettes. A tin of biscuits and tea. And this actually proved to be pretty bad for the British. Tea contains tannic acid, and if you have an abdominal gunshot wound, the tannic acid leaks into the peritoneal space and it causes massive infection. So like you would have guys survive the bleeding part, and then they'd be sitting and waiting to get evacuated. They'd be drinking all this tea, and then just get septic shock and die. But yeah, it's very basic. I hope to do another video again with a little bit more in depth with a bigger display here.
This is awesome though. So like what you were saying about like the limited of like morphine.
Yeah. Was
there any alternatives that they would use like with when they didn't, or would they ever, like if they met up with the U.S. or anything, would they like try to be like, hey, can we get some? Or
so in my readings, and it's very limited, and you always have to take everything into account with like a grain of salt.
Absolutely.
They were like really big on aspirin for pain management, which as a nursing student, you know, like aspirin and bleeding don't mix, causes a lot worse side effects. So a lot of the time they just withhold that. But also, again, like specifically the airborne, but everybody during the times was acquiring things from everybody else. So like if I was to jump into a village and we took a German platoon and they had a medic, and for whatever reason the medic was killed, we would take their equipment and hopefully that they would have something like this. Or even you would see like inter-unit bartering. Like if an airborne unit came across a bigger unit, like, hey, we have a bunch of Lugers, can you give me like a case of morphine? But also like you see a lot of like medics working side by side, especially in more so the airborne forces. You see captured Germans helping Americans. You see captured British helping the Germans, and there was a lot of that intermingling going on because you were a protected member of the Geneva Convention. Now, obviously in Arnhem it got a little weird because of the pistol thing, but they carried pistols, we had pistols, there was like a mutual agreement. If you had an armband on, you're pretty much safe, not like the Pacific where they just tried to target you.
Yeah, it was awful.
But, yeah, I mean, any other questions?
What got you into reenacting, and then how long have you been reenacting?
Oh man. So it's something that I've always wanted to do. When I was a kid, my grandparents would take me to a local Civil War reenactment, and that kind of like sparked the interest a little bit. And I had no idea that World War II reenacting was even a thing. When I was 12 years old, I joined a program called Civil Air Patrol.
Nice.
And I was from Philadelphia, and there's a big event in Reading, Pennsylvania every year called World War II Weekend.
They do a phenomenal job.
And I would go and volunteer for that, and I had no idea it existed. And my only World War II exposure, because my grandfather was a Vietnam vet, was playing Medal of Honor. And then after I played Medal of Honor, specifically with British Airborne, there's one mission where you're in Arnhem, and I was like, I kept asking my grandfather, like, who are these guys with the red beret? And he's like, I got a movie for you, because I was a little bit older, probably like 11 or 12, and he showed me A Bridge Too Far. And that's when I got really, really deep into the whole like Red Devils, airborne culture. It resonates to me because, you know, hundreds of guys jumped into Arnhem, almost all of them, small percentage actually made it out, and they fought to the very end, and they were holding on to the hope that reinforcements were coming from 30 Corps, and that like warrior spirit of like not giving up resonates with me in my personal job. I mean, you know, I work in a very resource limited city. We know that our budget's not going to expand anymore, so you know, we come to work every day and we do the job, and I find that personal relation, mind you, it's not war, but you know, it's that spirit of not giving up. And that's specifically why I do airborne. This is actually my second event. I did World War II weekend in Reading this year with 21st IPC. We had a North Africa / Italy campaign set up, and then this is my second event. And I think as far as like public interaction, this is, you can't top this event. This is amazing.
That's good to hear. That's rewarding to hear. So that's good. Wow, that's incredible. So how has your real world of what you do, he's a paramedic, does a phenomenal job as a paramedic, and how have you found, now at Reading, did you use like what you were as a real world paramedic, or is this like your first event using? So
this was my first event hands-on. At Reading, as a Civil Air Patrol member, this was years ago, the rules were a little bit different. We were kind of like our own medical support for ourselves. And it was a lot of what we did here this weekend, where it was, you know, drink water, change your socks, take ibuprofen.
Kind of basic.
All the preventative stuff to stay, you know, keep yourself from getting overheated. Reading was a very hands-off event. They have their own medical people. Here, you know, it's super applicable, and, you know, as much as I wanted to be in a more direct patient care role, you know, I still found myself extremely busy in a support role. And sometimes as a medical professional, that's the best thing that you can do, is be the calm voice of reason. You know, it gets very chaotic. People start dropping from heat, and you just have to be able to calm everybody down around you, calm the person down that's being affected, determine whether or not they're having an actual emergency versus a perceived emergency, and then make sure that they get the adequate resources that they need. And it's awkward for me because I'm a very hands-on person. I'm very passionate about what I do. I like to be hands-on and direct with my patients, but it's also good for growing, and it's also good because, like, just like the paratroopers in ARM, like if I wasn't here to do it, who would be? And that's how I feel about our entire medical team, because, you know, local EMS is here to help, and they're phenomenal people. UH hospitals are here, and they're phenomenal people. But again, it's 2025. Everybody's resource limited. So just like those paratroopers in 1944, you know, we're all out here fighting the same fight.
Absolutely. And it takes, like, it's been absolute teamwork, because we've had from, like, the Commonwealth, the Allied, even the Axis, like all of the different, like, real world medical that have been embedded into the reenacting realm of, like, us all coming together. And I think that's been the most rewarding part for me, like, this event, is seeing and getting to meet, like, this is how I was able to meet you, and just seeing all the different sides of everybody has been cool, because even back then it was a teamwork. It, like, didn't matter, like, you know, what side you're going to take care of the person.
A very public display of that a lot of people get familiar with is in Band of Brothers, when they're in the Ardennes, and you have Doc Rowe going back to the aid station, and you have that Dutch nurse there, and they kind of form that bond and that connection. That doesn't just happen in the movies. That happened back then.
Oh, absolutely.
And it happens every day to day. You know, as a paramedic in the real world, we form bonds with the nurses at the hospital, we form bonds with the doctors at the hospital, our local police, everybody that's there to support us. And then, again, reinforcing it here. So, like, that's one of those things that, like, I'm a very, like, emotional person when it comes to that, because I like being able to find purpose and reason behind doing things. And being able to make that relationship is really awesome. Because, like, even though we're not in World War II right now, all of us here, we're living the spirit of the people that came before us.
That itself has a lot of power.
Yeah.
I think that's what makes this, sometimes in a way, this event unique, is it has that spirit. Which is pretty unique to find, honestly. There's a lot of events it's not really there anymore. I am so grateful that we have you.
Absolutely.
I hope you're back next year.
Absolutely.
We're going to keep you forever, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But no, thank you so much, and thank you for teaching us a little bit about some of the history that you're helping keep alive.
Absolutely. Thank you.